Welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our media and political experts. MMA Creative Vice President, Democratic Operative Mike Kopp, and heard on the 1510 WLAC syndicated talk show host, Steve Gill. Welcome, gentlemen. Nice to see you both. We saw from the TEA, they're obviously fighting the Republican-led opposition to collective bargaining in this state. Republicans have the votes. We know that. They want to do this. It's going to happen. I guess the question is this about collective bargaining? Is this about representation from the Retirement Fund Board, or is this about eliminating TEA in Tennessee?
Well, I think when you look at the national polling, government unions are not in favor. And this is a government union, and I think what you're seeing play out in Wisconsin and Ohio and New Jersey and other places, that when you're looking at the benefits and the pay that government union employees are receiving, it is so far and above what the taxpayers are getting, and starting to balance some of these budgets by saying you ought to contribute something to your retirement, you ought to contribute something to your health insurance, and do we really need collective bargaining with public employees unions is something that I think the voters, and certainly in the polls, are saying they don't want this, and I think that's going to be the same thing in Tennessee.
More to your point, though, if you look at the breakdown of where contributions are made by these unions, you're going to see that the majority of them go to Democratic candidates. So it only makes sense that when the Republicans are in power, they do everything they can to bust up that union and create a situation where it's more difficult for those people to coalesce behind a candidate, either through pooling their resources or pooling their votes.
Here in Tennessee, being a right-to-work state, teachers do not have to join the TEA. They do not have to be represented by the TEA if they choose not to. Does that factor in at all? Does that weaken their hand in the first place? And does it make it less of a need to eliminate collective bargaining since it's not as strong in this state?
Well, I think there's a point being missed here by the TEA, frankly. I think they've missed an opportunity over the years to make a stronger case for what they stand for. I think they get caught in this political game of talking about teacher pay. There's a lot of other things that they can do, and they do, to contribute in their collective bargaining, which is class sizes and other things that have a positive impact on education. And I think if they were better at selling their message, they might get more teachers to get involved. But the fact of the matter is they haven't been.
Talk strictly about pay.
Exactly, right.
Well, and when you look at what's going on in Wisconsin, they're not talking about education, classroom size, materials, or anything else. It's all about we want more when the state's out of the money, and that's what the TEA, that's what the teachers' unions are really all about. It's we want more money, and I think people are starting to see through that. I think the bigger issue, though, is the collective bargaining in Tennessee. While the right to work is here, there is an inordinate pressure, particularly on a young teacher. You have to join the union if you're going to get treated right, if you're going to get treated right in the teacher's lounge, if you're going to get tenure. If you don't join the union, you're going to get punished. And I think removing that threat, that intimidation factor in Tennessee would be good for all teachers and all of our students.
No, I think the fact of the matter is the TEA and other unions like that have done a lot to help improve a situation in a classroom. And I think the younger teacher can benefit by knowing that. Instead, what they do is they get caught up, as I said before, in this whole argument that it's all about pay and benefits, and it's not just about pay and benefits.
Whether you support collective bargaining, support unions or not, should anyone really be surprised about what's happening? Republicans won the election in November. They campaigned on this, that they were going to target these kinds of issues, and so there's really no surprise here. And the unions are fighting, saying that's their right, when actually it's a piece of legislation that enabled collective bargaining and unions to exist to begin with. And those pieces of legislation now can be changed if the will of the parties is to change it and the Republicans are in power.
Well, elections have consequences, and there were elections in Wisconsin and Tennessee and all across the country.
Where all this is happening.
And what the unions are missing in this battle, certainly in Wisconsin, is the vitriol, the hate, the foul language, trying to compare Governor Walker in Wisconsin to dictators when it's the Democrats who fled the state to avoid the democratic process. Can you imagine the media outcry if the Republicans in Washington had fled to the Bahamas to keep from voting on the stimulus plan, to keep from voting on Obamacare because they didn't have the votes? The media would have properly ripped them to shreds, and I think you're going to start seeing in the media in these states where the Democrats have run away while they're saying that there's no democracy in process. They're running away to deny votes that they will lose in Ohio and in Wisconsin, and they may do the same thing here in Tennessee, and I think that's disgusting.
Well, I think the point is that you're right. It should be no surprise. These unions supported Democratic candidates. The Republicans got elected across the board.
It's a little bit
payback time. That's exactly what it is. But the fact of the matter is, in these states, whether it's Florida or Wisconsin or Ohio, where you have these Republican governors, what you're seeing now is a Republican governor coming in and giving corporate tax breaks, business tax breaks, and then turning to say we're going to take money away from these government employees. All that sounds good, but at the end of the day, if it's not going to balance the budget, which it's not going to do, it is going to create a backlash politically that we're going to see like we did in the 80s when you had that trickle-down economics at the federal level. That's what they're doing in Wisconsin, and it's going to backfire on
Well, it's going to balance the budget in Wisconsin. They've got a $3.6 billion budget deficit. Either they're going to do this and some of the other fixes, or they're going to lay off 10 or 12,000 government union employees across the state of Wisconsin. We're going to see the same thing in Tennessee. You've got to balance the budget. Unlike Washington, where they just keep putting it on the credit card and have done so to the tune of over $14 trillion, they're having to balance this. I would also point out that it's not just Republican governors. Andrew Cuomo in New York is about to do the same thing. He is refusing to raise taxes because he's realized they're running business out of the state, and while it may cater to the Democratic Party base to punish the rich, they've punished the rich to the fact that they're in bankruptcy. California's in bankruptcy. Michigan's in bankruptcy. All these states run by Democrats are in bankruptcy. You've got Republicans and now some right-minded Democrats like Cuomo stepping in to say, we're going to fix it.
He's not trying to eliminate the unions, though.
He's taking pension money and is going to cut their benefits.
And again, what they said in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Education Association said they were willing to make concessions to help balance the budget. It's going the extra step and saying we want to eliminate collective bargaining and giving you the right to have a voice in what happens in education. And that's where the protests are happening.
We have not heard from Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam where he stands on this yet. Likely he would support it, but he has not said one way or the other where he supports the elimination of collective bargaining, the change in the Retirement Fund Board. He wants to deal with tenure first. It sounds like now the House and Senate Republicans are going to go ahead with his wish and go with that first.
Well, he's got an education plan, and I think they're going to let him go first, but I think they may actually do the rest of the education reform packages later that same day. I don't think you're going to see some big delay between when the governor makes his proposal and when the legislature deals with that and then deals with the other stuff.
One of the challenges the governor still has is he doesn't have an education commissioner, which is really going to be important before you get too far down this track.
Senator Bill Ketron this week proposed making Sharia law, those who follow it, a felony in this state. Now, already any religion has law. Many religions have law, and state laws, federal laws, all supersede any religious laws. Is there really a need for this kind of legislation?
Well, I think part of it is to send the message that we're not going to tolerate the imposition of Sharia law in a backdoor way. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled years ago that while there is religious freedom, for example, among the Mormon faith, the idea that we're going to have multiple wives was struck down unanimously by the Supreme Court. And I think that while we respect religious freedom in this country, you cannot allow other subversive laws, whether it's Mormon religion putting in a law or whether it's Sharia law, changing the dictates of our laws and our culture. And I think that's part of what Ketron's dealing with.
I think what Ketron's doing is what a lot of the other Republican legislators are doing. These are all distraction bills. Instead of talking about jobs, instead of talking about the economy, instead of talking about things that matter to people right now, they're wanting to talk about things that are on the fringe. And that's going to come back and bite them at some
30
point.
seconds to go, but trying to declare it a felony, that's the tough part. You can do aspects where it would be illegal to follow this, but making it a felony would be kind of rough or kind of difficult.
Part of the problem is that under Sharia, there is this acknowledgement or acceptance of husbands beating their wives. That should also be illegal in Tennessee. But if you've got a system that's trying to impose that, that's where we've got to push back against it.
If you don't have a job, you don't care about those kind of issues.
And that act would be illegal anyway.
Exactly.
Mike Kopp, Steve Gill, appreciate your time and your insights. Stay with us. This week continues in a moment.